Chapter 5 Lucian's Grave. Once we settled back in, I made 3 very important stops. They were all long overdue, but I made sure I visited my grandparents' grave, then my mother's, and the final resting place of Lucian Graves. With each visit, I left 2 flowers behind, one to honor what I knew and didn't know about their lives, and one to thank them for mine. I believe I will always feel that I left some things unsaid and even undone, especially when it comes to Lucian Graves. But to me, that was just another tough lesson I guess I had to learn. A lesson about not taking the time that I am given or anyone in my life for granted. I pray that somehow, in some way, even though I have to live with my missed opportunities and chances to reconnect, they all know I have learned my lesson. With Sarah and Noah back, I kept my word, and I didn't take anything for granted. Not my job, not my friends, not my time, and most importantly, not them. I will always be far from perfect, but I think people in life in general are somewhat purposely designed that way. How else would we learn our lessons? Right before New Year's, we got a call at home that Sarah answered. When she told me there was a lawyer on the other end wanting to speak to me, I got a little nervous. I was thinking, hopefully, that judge didn't change his mind and want me to serve the rest of my sentence out. I had those thoughts sarcastically, but I was still a little nervous for real when I got on the phone. The man on the other end said that he represented Lucian Graves' estate and that I was his sole beneficiary. The lawyer acknowledged that Lucian never had much, but he did have an old pickup truck, a few acres of land, and that old house that was now mine. I didn't know what to say, to be honest. To my knowledge, Lucian Graves had never given me a single material thing in my life, other than Buddy the dog that my mother wouldn't let me keep. But now, after he's gone, he's giving me a truck and his house. I didn't know whether to sell it or move in. Either way, I knew it was my responsibility to go through his belongings to decide what the next best steps would be. Every weekend for 2 months and several evenings each week, Sarah and I would go over to Lucian Graves' house and respectfully pack many of his things up to either donate or keep. I still felt a little strange being in his house, but as the weeks went by and the more personal items I came across, the more welcomed I felt. Lucian Graves still had stacks of Polaroid pictures of my mother, of me, and of us together. Not just a few, a whole bunch. He also had the obituaries for both my grandparents and my mother, carefully cut out and glued into a picture book with pressed roses tucked in between the pages. It was almost like his own personal homage to what once was. He even had pictures of me before I left for the military as an adult. I have no idea how he got that, because I never saw him, but again, it was almost as if it was a tribute to the pride he had for me. He had other pictures, too, ones of his army buddies and of the tank he was assigned to drive. I think my jaw literally hit the floor when I saw a photo of him standing in front of his tank, with what was obviously his call sign painted on the side. It read, Ironheart. I was shocked and kept thinking, oh my God. Lucian Graves was the angel who brought Poppy home. After fully realizing that connection, I sat on the floor for almost an hour completely stunned. I called Sarah and Noah over to sit with me. Noah didn't understand what was going on, but Sarah did. Maybe I spent all these years misjudging a man who was in reality a hero to many. All these emotions flooded my soul, not just about Lucian Graves, but about my buddies who didn't make it home and all the decisions I've made by taking the path of least resistance in the past. If I hadn't made up my mind before, that discovery sealed it. My little family would be moving into my father's house. This was the first time I ever truly considered Lucian Graves as my father, but I think that was also the first time I knew enough about him to do so. Sarah and I took our time moving in. We painted and fixed up one room at a time. We didn't have a lot of money, so it was a slow process. But we did all we could to make everything as perfect as we could for our new life together. The house itself was pretty big. It was much bigger than anything Sarah and I had ever lived in. Although the house needed a lot of work, it was on quite a few acres with a big pond out back. The grass had grown up so high before we moved in, I nearly drove my riding lawnmower slap dab into the pond without even realizing there was a pond on the property. But to me, the absolute best thing about Lucian Graves' house was the Watcher was back. The Watcher kept to his rightful place on one of the lower hanging branches on that old oak tree near that old porch swing, but every now and then he'd hop down to the ground to grab some of those cookies Noah and I would bake for him. The Watcher liked any cookie, but without question his favorite was macadamia nut, which just so happened to be Noah's and mine too. Once we were fully moved in, I spent quite a few evenings sitting on that porch swing talking to something I once thought was a curse, or at least a symbol of one. Sometimes even Sarah and Noah would sit out there with me talking to our new feathered family member. I guess I'm grateful we didn't have any neighbors that lived too close to us, because if they saw us out there talking to a raven on most nights, they'd probably think we were all off our rockers. As the first few months went by, we had friends and family over. Poppy, Deuce, Dexter, and Sarah's mom were there almost as much as we were. Now, when Sarah's mom cooks for us, she doesn't slam my dinner plate down quite as hard as she used to. Poppy filled me in on all the stories he had about our unexpected connection. Ironheart. Lucian Graves sounded like a completely different man than any story I'd ever heard about him, but as time went on, I knew it was truly him. Deuce and Dexter started their own construction company together. I've also become the lucky beneficiary of being able to use any of their heavy equipment whenever I wanted to clear out an acre or two behind our new house. I didn't realize how much I enjoyed riding around on those giant machines, watching that beautiful gift from Lucian Graves come to life. Sometimes I'd ride around for hours on the bulldozer, long after the job was done, in awe and gratefulness of how my family's life was changing for the better. The pond I didn't even know we had, the one I almost sank a riding lawnmower in, quickly became one of my favorite places, second only to the porch swing with my family and the Watcher by my side. The only downside to clearing the land was prior to then we couldn't see any of our neighbors. But thanks to my unintentional landscaping ability, I ended up creating a direct path for a few unexpected neighborly visitors. I still could barely see their house, but they obviously saw ours and the path to get there. I didn't mind having neighbors, but there was something nice about feeling like my family was on its own little island. I almost felt guilty for having those thoughts, especially after I met our new neighbors. Once the path was cleared, 4 of the kindest people I've ever met came over to introduce themselves. They brought some of the best food I've ever put in my mouth, especially the desserts. Their family consisted of 4 adults. The husband's name was Ron Thayer, his wife Linda, and Linda's parents who evidently lived with them. They insisted on everyone calling them Nani and Papa, just like I used to call my grandparents. In fact, I wouldn't forget Linda's name either, because that was my mother's name as well. It didn't take long for our new neighbors to feel more like family, every bit as much as any family I've ever known. Ron even taught Noah how to fish and bait his own hook, and for some strange reason, it felt like our family had known theirs since the beginning of time. It was almost like having the best parts of our own families back together. They gave us space when we needed it, but most of the time we really didn't want too much time away because of all the love we realized we were sharing. Realizing how blessed we truly were, other than just riding around on the bulldozer, there were also many days I'd find myself sitting on that old porch swing. I didn't just talk to the Watcher, although I did that a lot, but I also often looked up to the heavens, thanking both the ghost I once barely knew and the one who has always known me the best.